Hey guys, welcome back to the Great Ace Attorney 2. Let's carry on where we left off. We've once again raised some mayhem as we entangle ourselves in yet another conspiracy and scandal. We've accused Dr. Scythe, nee Stevens, of being an accomplice to Enoch Drebber and his convoluted trickery regarding the instantaneous kinesis machine. In fact, she may have doctored the autopsy reports, considering the fact that she's adamant that there were no duplicates of any bird cages fallen from the sky. It really did happen, and there's only one body to be found of Odie Asman. And now we are currently debating the true identity of the professor, as we've already established that the double was actually the waxwork that was kidnapped / abducted / stolen from Madame Tuspel's waxworks. And it's obvious to me that the person underneath the mask is Professor Mikatoba from Japan, Susato's father. I'm just kidding. That was just the most controversial, most outlandish person that could be underneath that mask, considering it took place, 10 years ago, and that's when Mikatoba was here in Britain. I still don't understand what happened all those years ago with his visit and whatnot, but I'm sure we'll find out soon enough, because we're about to get to the bottom of what really happened. Okay, enough of a recap, goodness me. I'll prove that Dr. Scythe and Drebber were in on this crime together. We will, as soon as I can poke a hole in this current testimony presented to us by the Madame Tuspels, who, thankfully, I won't have to replicate her French accent for this part of the cross-examination. The special exhibit in the House of Horrors is based on a rumor that shocked society in London. An impression of the visage was taken directly from the corpse. In accordance with Tuspel's family principles, I enlisted the aid of the grave digger and created a mold for the head in the cemetery just before the interment. I hid myself until he gave me the signal. I was there for a very long time that night. Dawn approached. You were worried you could be discovered. Okay, well, I'm kind of curious as to the identity of this grave digger, so let's start by pressing this statement. I'm probably going to press all of them, because obviously I don't think we've got anything right now that can, well, dispel what she has to say. Surely that's illegal, isn't it? Well, it would seem the proprietress of this repository of novelties was blinded by monetary greed. It had nothing to do with money. The man is part of London's criminal history. That is why I had to sculpt him, to record this history. It is the raison d'etre of the Tuspels Museum. But if the man was convicted in a closed court and sent for immediate execution, then surely nobody but the members of the judiciary present know the killer's true identity. I mean, it's looking like the killer never got executed in the first place, right? Maybe it was some top-ranking official. They were like, okay, we need to cover this up. Let's just quietly say that this person got executed. But then, we've got a whole spiel about someone getting shot after climbing out of the professor's grave. What the hell is that all about, right? Like, is that when the professor really died? Not quite sure. What was someone doing inside his coffin in the first place? I mean, that's one way to fake someone's death. Do the entire song and dance, burying him underground, 6 feet. I assure you, behind that mask is hidden the true face of the professor. Do you realize what you're saying? The professor's identity is a national secret. I understand. And now that the truth about the special exhibit has been revealed, it must perhaps close. Of course it will. As will your entire museum if you don't tread carefully, madame. That could be another interesting chapter in the history of my family, I think, don't you? So, 10 years ago, on the night of the professor's execution, you took a wax impression of his face from the corpse? Oui, exactement. Okay, well, there you go. She molded his face. You hid yourself until he gave you the signal. You were there for a very long time that night. You were there longer than you expected to be? I had some difficulties in capturing the subject's form correctly. As I removed the mask, the mouth of the cadaver fell open and I had some problems with the chin. Dare I ask? The man had been dead for a short while already, you see. His muscles were relaxing and consequently his chin would not align itself correctly. Okay, cool. Right, so he's got a deformed chin. Oh dear, what a horrible thought. Under normal circumstances, I would have an assistant with me. However, that night I was alone, and as a consequence, missed my preferred window of time. So, instead of being horrified by his deformed chin, you just went, tut tut, should have got here sooner. Damn, Gravedigger took too long to give me that signal. What do you mean? When I take the impression of the visage of a cadaver, I always wait until 3 hours after death. Why 3 hours? Is that amount of time significant? It is because of rigor mortis. A Wrigley mortis? What? Hang on, let me consult my book, which has every definition in the world. It's the name given to a phenomenon that occurs in recently deceased bodies. As a rule, 3 hours post-death, the muscles in the body begin to stiffen. By approximately 10 hours post-death, the entire body is completely rigid and inflexible. And yet his chin was all wriggly. And then from that point on, the muscles slowly start to revert to their relaxed state. Right. The effect is often used to estimate the time of death when a body is discovered. Huh. So she was there longer than 10 hours. Well, that was an education, if a slightly scary one. Sheesh, no wonder I learned law so quickly. I just read your book aboard the SS Buria. As the Mademoiselle says, rigor mortis commences 3 hours after death, and it starts in the jaw. I see. So that's why you wait. Before that time, the mouth falls open, and it is very difficult to do my work. It's getting hard for me to do my work with all this talk of corpses. I wonder about that information the courts just heard from Madame Tuspels. It's significant. Of course it is. It always is. The information about rigor mortis, or Wrigley mortis, whatever she said, that she just shared with us, would you mind including it in your formal testimony? I believe it could be significant, you see. Of course. I do not mind at all. I can't help feeling that after this latest topic, the atmosphere in the courtroom has become extremely grave. Jeez. I thought you were going to say rigid. This is no time for jokes, Miss Susato. God damn it. You want to get cursed? Madame, kindly amend your testimony as discussed, and young lass over there, please stop joking about death. Especially when it's a dad joke. Bien sûr. Alright. It took me a very long time because it was before the onset of rigor mortis. Okay. What does that mean? Do we have anything right now, or do we need to keep pressing and find something new to add to the court record? Let's look at the article. There's not much detailed here, is there? Just a newspaper article recounting the tale of an eyewitness to the alleged resurrection of the professor from his grave on the night of his execution. How can there be rigor mortis, I suppose, when he's back from the dead, I suppose? Is there anything in particular that says something about that? His breath stilled once more? Shall we just present this and see?
Objection!
Nope, of course not. Despite the fact that he was still alive, clawing out of the grave, that last statement would seem to be at odds somehow with the evidence. It is your task, counsel, to explain the somehows to the court, not the other way around. Jeez, he penalized me before I even had a chance to explain the somehows. It just seems to jar, though. Don't you think? It doesn't jive, you know? I don't get good vibes from this piece of evidence and that testimony. What I think is that this whole exchange has been extremely jarring, yes. Perhaps I need to reconsider this. Okay, let's keep pressing and see what else we can come up with. Don't approach, you're very worried you'll be discovered. Let's go back to the fact that you got an impression of the visage, because you were complaining about it just now. Is that true of every waxwork in your museum, then? It is, assuming the subject is dead, of course. Live subjects have to cooperate in a similar way. I have letters from imprisoned criminals all the time, you know. What sort of letters? When my time comes, please make a waxwork of me. Comme si, comme ça. No. My museum is famous, monsieur. To be made into a waxwork is an honor, and for some criminals, a symbol of status even. Because nothing says hardened criminal better than wax. See? Ryunosuke's got the idea. Don't say your joke out loud, just keep it an internal monologue. And it is thanks to one killer in particular that my museum has gained such popularity in London. I refer to the star of the special exhibit, of course, the professor. Whose form you claim to have captured by taking an impression from the actual corpse. There are no exceptions to the principles of Tuspels. I am so curious as to what we're gonna see underneath that helmet. Nothing so far. Okay, back to the beginning. Press this statement. And that rumor would be a 10-year-old tale now, but one that no Londoner would ever forget. Alright, I know just what you're talking about, I think. Of course, it couldn't be anything else. Yes, that story will never disappear. The tale of the condemned killer rising from the dead. That is the central attraction of my House of Horrors. The rumor was whispered all over the city, and it was like this. Oh, story time. Okay, here we go. It was in Lowgate Cemetery behind the prison. In the dead of the night, after the execution of the killer. The interred professor slid back the stone slab covering his tomb and emerged from his grave. A young man who witnessed this felt a scream welling up inside him. But an instant later, he heard an ear-splitting gunshot from over his shoulder. The bullet struck the emerging corpse, and he fell motionless once more. The scream finally found its way from the mouth of the young witness, who turned and ran for his life. What a creepy yet amazing tale. The corpse climbed out of his own grave. And then somebody shot him. Who was it? Nobody knows, even today. Did you do it, Madame Tussbells? We were like, fuck, you're supposed to be dead. I can't take a mold of you while you're alive. I'm gonna need your permission. I'm just gonna shoot you in the chest and wait 10 hours. But remember, it was just a rumor. Perhaps nothing more than a ghost story. The good people of London, they love stories like this. That is why it was in every newspaper across the capital. But was it just a story? I mean, this is exactly the scene that can be seen today at your museum, isn't it? Oui. The special exhibit was modeled on the very illustration. For a while afterwards, the contents of that article were reproduced in every newspaper imaginable. Madame, might I say something? Please go ahead, mademoiselle. When something is described as a rumor, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's entirely made up. I believe that often, rumors contain elements of the truth. Ah, I see that people from the East can be just as astute as the people of Europe. Can we be sure, for instance, that the professor's execution was successful? Ooh, here we go. It is not possible for the dead to come back to life. Sorry? I'm looking at one right now. He's opposite me, on the prosecutor's bench, cutting open the freaking cork to pour into the hallowed chalice. 10 years ago, I was there in Lowgate Cemetery. After the criminal known as the Professor was killed by hanging, I took a wax impression of his visage from the corpse just before he was interred. Yes, you did mention that, so I can assure you, the man was dead. I see. Was he dead after he got shot, or what? It would certainly appear that the condemned man suffered the intended fate. Van Zeeks is all too happy to hear that. I think that's his happy face. Okay, well, we learned a few things, but nothing got added to the court record as a result of that, even though we had story time. Last statement of precedent, I've got to really think hard about what we're going to present. As dawn approached, you were very worried you would be discovered. You say that dawn was approaching. What was the time of day then? Approximately. Ah, of course, here we go. Because he was executed at midnight, no? Where we go? Midnight, 17th of June. She's there until the break of dawn, and yet rigor mortis had already come and gone, and he was beginning to slacken, so to speak. Well, I could not say. But when I left the cemetery with my utensils and wax, the morning light was becoming visible. The execution took place on 17th of June, which had the earliest sunrise of that year. Really? Interesting. I would have thought it would be on the 21st or the 22nd.
Indeed it did. First light would have been around 4:40 in the morning.
That really is early. Daylight savings, I guess, wasn't a thing back then. Not that it really matters if June. Oh wait, no, June. That is summer in Britain. I forget because I'm a Southern Hemisphere boy. The fact is, I had very little time, so I finished my work in half hour. It was necessary to complete the oppression and bury the body before daybreak, of course. If somebody had discovered me there, it would have been a catastrophe, so I had to hurry.
Is it me, or does Mr. Shum seem to be taking shape more quickly now, too? You certainly appear to go to extraordinary lengths for your work, madame.
I wonder, is what you just said particularly significant? It is significant. I just need to figure out which statement I need to press. Madame, those details about how long it took you to complete the sculpture in the early sunrise, could you include them in your testimony? I believe they may be significant. Of course, if you would like me to. You're quite right, Mr. Naruhodo. It is intriguing. A sunrise at 4 in the morning would be an absolutely unimaginable at home, wouldn't it?
That's not quite what I meant by significant, even though we're the land of the rising sun and all. Kindly amend your formal testimony then, madame.
With pleasure, my lord.
Okay, here we go.
Of course it was the last statement. I hurried to finish my work in the half hour before sunrise. Then I left as soon as the corpse was interred. Took you a long time because it was before the onset of rigor mortis.
Okay. Is it this one?
Or is it the previous one? I'm gonna start with this one. Let's see.
Objection.
Okay. Phew. This one made a little bit more sense. Madame Tuspels, I have here an autopsy report that was filed 10 years ago now. It confirms the death of the professor following his execution at the gallows. And? Is that a problem? I believe it is, because your testimony and a particular detail in the report completely contradict one another, and that's my job, pointing out the contradictions. Oui? Quoi? Sorry. Are you going to explain yourself, my Nipponese friend? Naturally. Of course I will. I don't want to get penalized again, thank you very much. According to her testimony, Madame Tuspels was creating her wax impression just before dawn, and at that time, rigor mortis had not yet set in. Am I correct so far, Madame? You are, yes. As I said, the stiffening of the jaw is the first sign of rigor mortis 2 or 3 hours after death. But the man's chin was limp, so he cannot have been dead for a long time. But on the other hand, if you look at Dr. Scythe's report, it quite clearly states the following. Death by hanging, confirmed at midnight, 17th June. No. If the professor indeed died at midnight that day, then by the time you were sculpting his face, rigor mortis would already have set in. Oui? Yes? You are right, the chin? It would have been completely stiff? In other words, this report is wrong.
Objection.
Now I'm getting no, that's too far. I can't say that in court of law. No coroner makes mistakes when recording the time of death. The very idea is absurd. In that case, there's only one possible conclusion. The execution didn't actually take place at the stated time. Impossible. Uh-oh. What happened that night?
Order, order! Counsel, this is beyond folly. Not only do you indict the author of the report, Dr. Scythe, but you also implicate members of staff at Berkeley Prison, where the execution took place.
By heck. Extraordinary. Not in my day.
Objection.
Oh god, I'm really I'm ruffling everyone's feathers now. My learned friend appears to have overlooked one very crucial fact. What fact? The professor died that night, without question. He did? Of course he did. I moved the man's limp jaw with my own hands. There was no... Yes, the professor died that night. But what if he didn't die at the gallows? Didn't die at... Are you insane? What? What exactly are you suggesting did happen in that case? I'm suggesting he crawled out of his grave and you shot him, Van Zeeks. Yeah, you're the culprit all along. This is a Godot situation. Is it? I don't know. It's almost impossible to believe, but it would explain the link between Dr. Scythe, the professor, and that one other person of interest. I have evidence that will explain exactly what I'm suggesting happened that night.
Counsel, present the evidence at once. The evidence that allegedly explains what really happened on the night of the professor's execution.
This, right?
Take that.
His resurrection. What happened that night is written very plainly in this newspaper article. In every newspaper, apparently, that day. Executed criminal returns in the dead of night at local cemetery. That's right, you gotta read it in that dramatic tone. You're suggesting it was a corpse coming back from the dead now? Well, if this article is to be believed, yes. The professor, assumed dead following his execution, emerged from his grave and was killed again. He thought he'd dodged death, but Final Destination, man. Tony Todd was there, claimed his life.
Objection!
Don't be a fool. That's simply a rumor published by the gutter press. Can you be certain of that? We've got the witness right here in this courtroom. By coincidence. Are you serious? The point is, as the article says, there was a witness to what happened.
My word, yes indeed.
But we? The young man who stole into the cemetery by chance that night?
Objection!
Of course there was a witness. The story didn't write itself. But obviously the man made it all up.
And in any case, that was 10 years ago now. There would surely be no hope of finding him. I had my hair back then even. I can't find that.
Objection!
What? Judge, shush. On the contrary, my lord. We all know this witness well. What?
Are you suggesting, counsel, that you've identified the person in question? That you know who claims to have seen these utterly incredible events take place?
Yes, my lord. Oh, God. I shook my head a little too hard there. My brain almost fell out. In fact, you could say that he's right here before my very eyes. And I'm not talking about the Professor Waxwork that got carted into the middle of the courtroom.
You will substantiate your latest claim now, then, counsel. Who was the alleged witness of this staggering scene from the cemetery 10 years ago?
I almost want to lie. I almost want to say, like, Van Ziegs. Can I just do it this once?
Take that!
It was Van Ziegs. Oh.
I must say I'm quite staggered by the scene I see before me now, counsel. That of a young man with his eyes tightly shut, clearly pointing at a person at random.
No, I said he was right before my very eyes. Oh god, I'm pointing the wrong direction, sorry. At least have the decency to open your eyes and face the result of your blunder, for heaven's sake. I thought there'd be special dialogue because Van Ziegs is literally like opposite. And perhaps you should keep your eyes open when you collapse on the bench like that too. For safety's sake. I'll bear it in mind.
You will substantiate your latest claim now then, counsel?
Okay, yes, okay. Sorry.
Take that!
I'll adjust my trajectory. The man in question is Mr. Enoch Drebber. Drebber?
The previous witness.
The special exhibit in the House of Horrors at Madame Tuspel's Museum of Waxwork recreates that decade-old scene in great detail. She even had permission to create a waxwork of him, I suppose. The condemned criminal emerging from the grave, and beside the tomb, a young man with a lantern stumbling upon the terrifying sight. And that young man is a 10-year younger Mr. Enoch Drebber. I'll recognize that black monocle anywhere.
Order! Surely not, counsel. This is too dramatic even for me. This is a twisty and turny case.
Drebber was there, in Lowgate Cemetery. What is all this talk about Mr. Drebber? Is the name significant? Oh, what did you know him as? Of course. Madame Tuspels doesn't know, does she? Yes, it's extremely significant, madam. To your situation as well, in fact. What situation? The theft of the Professor Waxwork from your museum some days ago was perpetrated by the very same man. No, but that would mean... He wasn't happy with your exhibit, considering he's part of it. Madame Tuspels. It would appear you know the name. Enoch Drebber. Well? Oui. Yes, I know it. But from long ago, in the past. What? Oh my. Enoch Drebber is the one who died that night. He's the professor.
Good gracious.
He stole his name, identity, or something of the sort. Explain yourself. Tell us everything you know. Did Enoch Drebber stumble upon the professor rising from his grave? The professor shot him and stole his identity, or something of the sort, maybe? Yes, of course. Uh-oh, I'm scared. I'm nervous. Pandora's box, it's opening. The story of the young man and the terrible sight he witnessed in the cemetery 10 years ago was published in every single newspaper in London and throughout Great Britain. However, in all of the articles, the witness was simply described as a certain young man. No details were published about his identity. His name was never revealed. That is, apart from in one newspaper. One newspaper revealed his identity. The Daily Circus. It is a paper from which comes the article I've already shown the court. You're saying that his full name was only publicized in that article?
Goodness me! Yes, here it is! The university student who experienced this shocking event is Mr. Enoch Drebber.
Wait, let me just take a look real quick. Yep, there it is. Disciple of Science at the University of London.
A disciple of science at the University of London, and a resident of its student dorms.
Unbelievable. When I read the article, I went to meet with the man. His discovery of the condemned criminal coming back to life in the cemetery in the dead of night would make a perfect exhibit for my House of Horrors, whether it was the truth or not.
I see. So you went to meet Mr. Drebber in order to sculpt a waxwork of the man, did you?
Now I'm curious, is it all coming into place now? We've got this old photograph of Drebber. Is there anything different about him? Ooh. I'm creeped out by the fact that Drebber may have died 10 years ago and has been replaced. And, surely it's got something to do with this contract. Ah! God, I'm salivating at the thought of solving this case, God. It's been a while since I've been excited about an Ace Attorney case. This one's got me good. Exactement. He was studying science at the University of London in those days. He was just a poor student. I paid him £5 to model for the waxwork. And since that time, it has been in my museum to recreate the scene of terror from the cemetery. I see. This would explain Dr. Scythe cooperating with Enoch Drebber. Because she's still helping the professor even to this day. So, 10 years ago, a young man appealed to the public about an extraordinary event he'd witnessed. A criminal who had been put to death, re-emerging from his grave in the middle of the night. But the public treated his claim as nothing more than an amusing anecdote. That was soon forgotten. 10 years later, the same man steals a waxwork model of the executed criminal, ostensibly to use as a body double for the victim in the case we're discussing here today, even though the waxwork's build is a poor match for the victim, and its face is obscured by a mask. So the question is, why would the man do such a thing? I don't know. I'm turning my brain off now. I just want to get taken for this one ride. Okay, no more guesses. No more trying to solve this. Just annihilate my brain, Ace Attorney. Do it. I dare you. Which brings us to 3 days ago, when the birdcage crashed into the Crystal Tower. If the birdcage had in fact contained not the body of Mr. Asman, but that same waxwork, the coroner from Scotland Yard who investigated, Dr. Scythe, would have noticed immediately. And yet, she submitted this autopsy report for the victim, which the court had seen earlier. Why? And why does she make her daughter wear a helmet too? Because the waxwork was that of the professor, is that what you're saying? Dr. Scythe put her name to a document confirming the death of the condemned criminal who was still alive. A criminal whose apparent resurrection was witnessed by Mr. Drebber. What's with all these people who were supposed to be dead coming back to life? But that misconduct was a deadly secret the coroner would do anything to protect. Which is precisely why Mr. Drebber used that particular waxwork as the body double. Ah! Blackmail, huh? My lord! This court must summon Dr. Scythe to the stand. The defense is determined to find out exactly how the coroner and Mr. Drebber are connected.
But according to the missive I received this morning through the prosecutor's office, Dr. Scythe is unable to participate in these proceedings. Is that not the case?
Yep, Lord Strongheart's orders.
She told us so herself, didn't she?
That she did.
Lord Van Zieks won't be summoning me as a witness. Lord Strongheart has forbidden it.
Lord Strongheart?
The Pandora's box you were warned about is the Professor case. But please don't make the mistake of thinking you'll get any information about it out of me.
Ice cold. Something happened on the night of that killer's execution 10 years ago, and surely nobody would want to get to the bottom of that more than Lord Van Zeeks. Come on, dude. I know you want to know the truth about your brother's killer. The prosecution calls for the instructions in that missive to be scrapped. Oh yeah, Van Zeeks, let's do it, baby.
But Lord Van Zeeks, the missive was issued from the Lord Chief Justice's office.
I'm a lord too.
Objection!
Oh, he's objecting to the judge. The assigned prosecutor has the final say on policy in any particular trial. In other words, me. Yes. Shut up. Let Enoch Drebber and Dr. Scythe both take the stand together. Here we go.
Order, order, order! Very well, I will uphold your request, but by golly, thank God I've already reached my pension age. Bailiff, send a subpoena with immediate effect, addressed to Dr. Scythe of the Forensic Investigation Team. The woman is compelled to attend on Her Majesty's orders.
Uh-oh. What's she going to say? Alright then. Enoch Drebber, Dr. Scythe. If they weren't colluding with one another, this crime could never have been committed. I'm just a stone's throw away. I can feel it. The truth behind all of this is about to come out. Hell yeah, baby. I am so down for this. Oh, damn. We're not even catching an intermission. Straight into it. And Madame Tuspels is still on the stand. Thank you for your attendance at such short notice, Dr. Scythe.
I'm disappointed in you, Lord Van Zeeks. You've completely betrayed the agreed policy of both Scotland Yard and the prosecutor's office.
Betrayal is not in my nature, as long as the truth isn't compromised. Besides, I think you betrayed Van Zeeks first if you're lying about his brother's killer. If it is, if there's even a hint of wrongdoing, then no matter whom it concerns or disgruntles, I will pursue the matter to the bitter end, as would any prosecutor worth his salt. Mr. Drebber, you took the victim's life by means of a machine that you constructed in your workshop. Well? And Dr. Scythe, as the investigating coroner, you were the first on the scene to examine the victim's body. It is the belief of the defense that you collaborated with each other and were both complicit in this crime.
And where's your evidence?
At present, we don't have definitive evidence, but we do have a very significant clue, and I know there's a distinction, but yeah, I'm going to conjecture my way to victory here.
What are you talking about?
Disc slam. I'm talking, of course, about the waxwork. This guy right here, this model of the killer known as the Professor, who was sentenced to death 10 years ago.
You don't need to tell me. I witnessed the man's execution with my own eyes, and officially pronounced him dead.
That remains to be seen.
Is that so?
Yes. According to newspaper reports from the time, because, you know, the press is always reliable, on the night following his execution, the killer came back to life.
Don't waste my time.
And the sole witness to that mysterious event was you, Mr. Drebber, wasn't it? Well, were you there? If what you saw in the graveyard that night 10 years ago wasn't some chilling fiction, but reality, it would make you privy to a very great secret of Dr. Scythe's. A secret so profound, it could compel the coroner to agree to collaborate in your evil scheme, in fact. Even though you needed Odie Asman alive to cash out. So what the hell? What is going on? If Mr. Drebber, tell the court. Tell everyone the truth of what you saw that night in Lowgate Cemetery. Go on.
So he was the student who saw it?
You can see the resemblance actually, can't you? With the man in Madame Tuspels, I mean.
Surely he's not going to claim that's really what he saw, especially not after all these years.
He was a research student at the University of London, was he?
And a bit too clever for his own good, if you ask me.
Go on.
What an interesting twist.
Huh? When at the time, not one person would take me seriously. Yet now here we are 10 years later, and suddenly my story matters. And in a court of law, too. Buffering. Very well then, if everyone so wishes. Let's be frank. I'll tell you the truth of what happened that night, for what it's worth. Well, I can't tell if she's happy or not. Downloading memories. Tick-tock.
So, Mr. Trevor, your testimony, please, and about the evidence of that night 10 years ago. You will tell the court exactly what you stumbled across in Lowgate Cemetery.
Yes, of course. As you wish. Let's hear it from the horse's mouth himself. In the cemetery 10 years earlier. The reason I was in Lowgate Cemetery at all 10 years ago was for a spot of moonlighting, shall we say. Yes, the illustration in that newspaper article was based on what I witnessed that night. But thinking back now, I realized that I never actually saw the professor. Soon afterwards, I was visited by a young woman who sculpted a model of me from wax. Then I gave up on my dream of becoming a scientist, and it was all because of that newspaper article. You gave up your dream, huh? But I've got an award in your, well, warehouse. Wait a minute, you're claiming you didn't actually see the professor now? Of course, you'd have to have a screw loose if you believed a corpse could come back from the dead. But, so you're saying this article is not worth the paper it's printed on? I think that would describe it perfectly, yes. Ugh.
The details in the article aren't true. It nullifies your argument for why Mr. Drebber and Dr. Scythe would have been working together. So he's discrediting himself to cripple my argument?
Jeez. Why don't you perform a seppuku while you're at it?
Tell me, witness. You claim to have been in the cemetery on some auxiliary business. Can you elaborate?
What was I doing that night? That's right. Grave robbing, to be precise. With a camera. As you know, Lowgate Cemetery is at the rear of Berkeley Prison. So among students at the university, it had a reputation of being haunted by the ghosts of condemned convicts.
Grave robbing, you say?
You're robbing a man who got executed on death row. You know he's got nothing on him, right? Yes. Exhuming fresh corpses to sell is reasonably lucrative. Okay, there you go. Of course, I never laid a finger on any valuables buried with the dead. So you are one of the so-called resurrectionists, a particularly unpleasant scourge on society. Actually, my fellows and I went by another name. The Repurposes.
That is quite beyond the pale. You would invite divine retribution, sir. Get out of my courtroom at once. Where's my crucifix?
Yes, well, I think I suffered retribution enough. The Daily Circus eventually unearthed my name and put it in print. It caused me a great many headaches. In the end, I had to leave the university. How do they know it was you? Like, how do they identify you? That was the only paper with the bad grace to identify me unambiguously, I might add. I see. It's just, like, how do they know he was there? Like, out of interest, who drew the illustration for this article? Ah, yes, that was the reporter who exposed me. He sketched that right in front of me as I described the scene. Odiasman? Obviously, as time ticked on, I bitterly regretted what I'd done, claiming to have seen something I never truly saw. Foolish. Very foolish. Well, now we've got motive.
Well, counsel for the defense, you may proceed to the cross-examination now.
At once, my lord. Okay. So, Odiasman was the reporter. The reason you were in Lowgate Cemetery, spot of moonlighting. Illustration based on what you witnessed that night. Thinking back now, you never actually saw the professor. This is by a young woman who sculpted a model. My dream of becoming a scientist. Royal Society Trophy for excellence in the science that was found in Mr. Dribber's workshop. Do I just present this up of the get-go? Am I rushing into things?
Objection!
Yeah, of course I am. Surely something about that last statement seems odd, doesn't it?
Would you care to mull over precisely what you find odd about it on your return journey to Japan?
God, again. Stop ushering me back to Japan. Alright, let's get back on track here. Okay, well, let's start at the beginning, like we should. We've got 2 lives left. That's fine. I think we'll be okay. Even though I kind of sacrificed one just to point out Van Zeeks as a potential witness to the resurrection of the professor. By moonlighting, you mean grave robbing, don't you? Surely you only need to look at the graveyard scene and my appearance to gauge the answer to that. The lantern and the spade. But who on earth would want to buy a dead body? Any major hospital. A hospital? In order to better understand the human body, the study of anatomy is crucial to medical science, but there isn't a hospital in the world that has enough specimens to work with, though obviously they can't openly express an interest in obtaining more by dubious means. As aspiring scientists, we young research students had no money to work with, as I'm sure you can imagine, so we made surreptitious arrangements with the hospital via some of our medical student acquaintances. These are big words for you, Nipponese man. We would never take anything of value from the graves. This was all for the furtherance of science, you see. That's what we all told ourselves every time we stole into the graveyard at night, spade in hand. You realize body snatching is a serious crime. If you were caught, you could expect the gravest of consequences. No pun intended. It's by me, of course. We students were caught between the hammer and the anvil. We needed funds for research. Professor Hairbrain said exactly the same.
I'm quite speechless at the apparent levity with which you revealed this abhorrent behavior.
Well, if you wanted to know why I was there at Lowgate Cemetery, that's the reason. But I never expected it to end the way it did. That I regret to this day. Okay, since we are able to check out the reactions of the people on the stand as well, let's fast forward over to when he got visited by Madame Tuspel, see if she reacts to whatever he has to say. That young woman being Madame Tuspel's, of course. Precisely. I must say I didn't expect to run into her again like this 10 years later. As I have explained, I went by the name published in the article and, comme ça, I found the man. Yes, the article in the Daily Circus, I think you said. I was a poor student with barely a penny to my name at the time. And the young lady put £5 in front of me. So you readily consented to having a waxwork of yourself made and gave permission for it to be put on display. I did. I should sell what little I had to sell, I concluded. Ah, oui. I remember now. I purchased something else from you that day, n'est-ce pas? What did you purchase? Did you? I can't say I remember. What was it, madame? His camera. Ah. Oh, yes, I made a point of taking it with me whenever I made an excursion into any cemetery.
You took a camera with you, sir? To what end?
To record the details of the bodies I disinterred. But I had no intention of ever visiting a graveyard again after that night, so I sold it.
I see.
But I still have it, monsieur. It is part of the special exhibit in my House of Horrors. I am very meticulous about such details. It is the Tuspel's way. It would seem, then, that this is the very camera Mr. Drebber took with him to Lowgate Cemetery on the night in question.
Yes, interesting. The details of the camera have been updated. The actual camera that Mr. Drebber had with him in the cemetery 10 years ago. When the lens is extended, dark staining can be seen on the bellows. Okay, important that that got updated. Glad I pressed that particular part of testimony. You never saw the professor. Okay, you never saw the professor, yet you got blood on your camera. What's that all about? What are you talking about? I think I explained already, didn't I? Lowgate Cemetery is at the rear of Berkeley Prison, so it was renowned among us students at the university for being haunted by the ghosts of condemned convicts. Processing. For some absurd reason, I was scared of the graveyard at night, and as a result, only too willing to believe that nonsense about the dead coming back to life.
But you said you actually saw it.
I said what I'd seen in my mind's eye. After all, resurrection is impossible, isn't it? You'd have to be unhinged to think otherwise. Unless, of course, the name of this chapter is called The Return of the Great Departed Soul. I mean, you have some evidence that proves I encountered the professor that night?
I don't know. Is there any material evidence that could show he really did see the professor?
If we have anything at all, Mr. Naruhodo.
I know. I need to present it against that irritatingly backtracking statement of his. The point is, that night was a pivotal moment in my life. Okay, I guess we're presenting the camera here. We're going for our last life. Oh god, I think it's too early, but... Oh god, I was right, it was too early. I'm too excited, I've got one life left, damn it. Okay, we got 2 statements left to press, so let's start by pressing this one here. The strange happening at Locate Cemetery, which you now deny. Not entirely. I ran to fetch the police at the time, you know. I was shaking like a leaf. But they didn't believe a word of it. In fact, I was very nearly arrested myself.
So you went to the papers instead?
I started big with the London News, but unsurprisingly, they didn't want to know either. I suppose that's how they found out his name, because he approached the press. Okay, gotcha. Sorry, forgive me.
I was like, how do they know who it was?
Of course he had to tell them. In the end, though, it was reporters from the gossip rags, the gutter press, that came to get my story, and it spread like the plague through the capital, as gossip-hungry Londoners lapped up the tale. The story was in every single paper at the time, with the exception of some broadsheets. And yet only 2 or 3 of them actually interviewed me personally. Most of the accounts turned out to be very interpretive ghost stories.
What about the article in the Daily Circus?
That particular journalist found me at my dormitory. I don't know how, but he discovered my name. So I recounted to him exactly what had happened that night.
So he approached them all anonymously, but this guy found out his name. Gotcha. And from your description, he drew this illustration? It's a pretty neat illustration.
Precisely. That's how I learnt that the condemned man was the infamous professor. Because the reporter told me so. I had no idea myself, you see. Newspaper reporters are wont to snoop around in matters that don't concern them. So the scene portrayed in the illustration is accurate, then. Well.
Okay, one last statement to press. You gave up on your dream of becoming a scientist. This article, you mean? Published in the Daily Circus?
Yes, somebody informed the dean that it was my name that appeared in the article, and carelessly let slip that night after night I was digging up graves. Hardly a model student, you might say. The university's reputation was execrably defiled, and I was expelled as a result.
Mon Dieu, I had no idea.
And having been run out of the university, you found employment in a somewhat specialist trade.
You combine your knowledge of science with knowledge of stage magic to create various experimental machines intended to demonstrate never-before-seen technology, and you use those deceptive machines to trick the government and private investors into giving you money. That's certainly a step up from grave robbing. Professor Albert Harebrain was just your latest victim, wasn't he?
Whatever are you talking about? I have no recollection of doing anything of the sort.
Well, that was one reaction. What's Drebber up to? Why would he suddenly change his tune and recant his claim?
I wonder if perhaps it's because his circumstances have changed now.
What circumstances?
Well, if he admits to having seen the professor emerging alive from his grave 10 years ago, it will expose the secret in Dr. Scythe's past that she would desperately want to hide.
Yes, of course. If Drebber and Dr. Scythe are working together now, then if Drebber were to betray her, there would be no reason for her to continue to cooperate. In that case, there's only one way around it. I'll have to prove he really did see it. Prove he really did see the professor's corpse coming back from the dead as he originally claimed.
Yes, Mr. Naruhodo, exactly.
Okay, how do I go about proving that? Okay, so we've gotten the clue.
that this is the statement we need to present. We need to present on the annoying piece of testimony where he recants his statement, right? Or it recants the fact that he saw the professor. What do we present? Let's go by process of elimination. No. Maybe? No, we already presented that. That one didn't work. No. Is there anything I missed on this? I don't think so. So that's got a lock. I've already looked at that. Autopsy report. Death by hanging. No. Post-explosion, no. Driver's contract. No. 10-year-old article. This feels like we shouldn't present that. Do we? It's not the camera, that's for sure. It's gotta be the statement. It's gotta be. Come on. Work up the courage, let's do it. 10-year-old article, let's see if we're right.
Objection!
Oh, what? Okay. You know what? I'm happy. Nope, I'm happy. Sorry, Mr. Drebber, but I don't believe that. I believe this tabloid article. Don't believe what? Your latest claim. You did see the professor on that night 10 years ago. I wonder, though, because we had to get the camera updated. Not sure. I'm sure that's going to be relevant soon, because the camera... Okay. I don't know how it works, but it's fine. I'm happy we're progressing. Oh dear, we seem to be at odds. But I was there, and you were not. I know what I didn't see. The illustration with this article was drawn based upon what you told the journalist that you witnessed. A figure emerging from a tomb, wearing an iron mask. Yes, when the killer was tried 10 years ago. It was decided in the closed court's ruling that the man would wear the mask to hide his identity. It wasn't to be removed even during his execution and subsequent burial. You can see now why the Hand of the Baskervilles is such a classified piece of fiction. Or semi-fiction.
Not even the prison wardens were to see the man's face. But obviously, the provision of this mask was not public knowledge.
Right, okay. So, Mr. Drebber, as you've just heard, how'd you know he was wearing a mask? Ugh. A lowly student of the University of London certainly wouldn't have known about the condemned man's mask. Right, of course, he would have had a face or something when he was described. So unless you'd actually seen the professor that night, it's inconceivable that the artist would have included the mask in that illustration. Ah!
Order, order! Well, Mr. Drebber.
Well? Maybe I did see him. It's a vile scene, isn't it? If you look closely. Huh? And as I've already been at pains to point out, I was utterly petrified. Which is why I had it in my head that I'd seen such a blood-curdling sight. But afterwards I came to my senses, and realized that I'd been mistaken. No, you can't backtrack that now. You're still saying you didn't see it. If you're stubbornly sticking to that story, witness, then amend your testimony to explain exactly how you think your eyes deceived you. Of course. Only too happy to oblige. I can't believe he's still not going to concede the point. Okay, you evil maniac. God. What I in fact witnessed was a fellow grave robber at work.
Hold it!
Okay, pressing this. A fellow grave robber. What are you talking about? Well, I wasn't the only one busy in the cemetery that night, you know. Other body snatchers were at work. Of course, when I saw one emerging from the hole he'd dug, my heart very nearly stopped. So that's the terrifying sight I actually saw, you see. You're claiming it was just another student on equally insalubrious business as yourself. I haven't seen that word before. Many of the medical students would wear metal masks to protect them from bacteria during dissections. And you didn't? Just a monocle, huh? Clearly the fellow was using such a mask to protect his anonymity, wouldn't you say?
Objection!
But there's more to the story, isn't there? The article goes on to say, in the next second, a gunshot rang out suddenly from behind. The bullet pierced the resurrected man's chest, whose breath then stilled once more.
We might assume that the sextons discovered the miscreants at work, perhaps, and fired upon one of them.
If a gravedigger had shot someone in the cemetery, I think it might have been rather big news, my lord.
Ah, yes, well,
I can only assume it was an embellishment bolted on later by the reporter. Oh, strange, you say?
Excuse me.
Excuse me. Madame Tuspels, don't take it out on Mr. Sholmes.
Ooh la la, pardon. I was lost in my thoughts.
Would it be fair to say that Mr. Drebber's last remark was significant to you in some way?
I thought it was a little strange, that is all. How Monsieur Drebber could claim this now.
If you don't mind me saying, madame, what are you talking about? Well, she was there too.
Well, when I met you 10 years ago at your university dormitory, you recounted to me about your adventures in the cemetery, no? Including the gunshot.
Stop! Oh, he's getting mad. You might want to watch your tongue, you know.
Objection.
He's objecting to the witness. Have a care, Drebber. That's no way to speak to a lady. Grr. Jeez, Vance, he's doing my job. I'm the one who objects to witnesses. Please, Madame Tuspels, carry on.
Of course. According to what Monsieur Drebber told me at the time, he did hear a gunshot from behind him, and the bullet hit the condemned man.
I said nothing of the sort!
No, you were very explicit about the details.
Stop, shut up! God, take the hint!
About the mask that the figure was wearing, and the blood that splattered over you when he was shot.
Enough! Shut up, woman! You're making all this up!
that will do! Mr. Drebber!
Yes?
Shut the fuck up! Sit down. You refute the account just given by Madame Tuspels?
I have no recollection of ever saying those things. Come on! Do you really expect us to believe you?
Control yourself, Consul! I will not permit baseless accusations in my courtroom.
They're not baseless, Your Honor. I mean, my lord. Sorry. Right.
I like that tiny little bit of shrinking he did. Under the circumstances, I think it best that you supplement your testimony with a statement to clarify your position on this witness.
Very well. Okay. I can see now that because we're returning to the same cross-examination testimony over and over, that I didn't need to get that camera piece of evidence updated up until right now where I'll need to present it. Okay, cool. I was gonna say, like, surely, like, what happens if I presented the newspaper article before I got the update on the camera? You can't say you'll deny me progress, right? There was no gunshot from behind me at all, nor any splattering blood. Okay, now I'm fully prepared, with all confidence,
Objection.
to present this camera. Mr. Drebber, do you remember this camera?
But that is the camera from that fateful night?
Yes, we borrowed it from the House of Horrors. It's the camera you took with you to the cemetery that night, Mr. Drebber. And is that supposed to be significant? This kind of camera is rarely seen in our homeland, so my colleague and I were keen to examine it closely, to add some notes to our blue book. We noticed that the lens extends forwards on the end of some bellows. Like this.
Hold it.
Whoa! What's that? There, just on the bellows. It looks like a dark red stain. Ah! Oh, that's right. You noticed too? It's a rather conspicuous mark here on the bellows, in fact.
Good lord, are you suggesting...
Yes, my lord. It would appear to be a spatter of blood.
Something that could be confirmed with a simple chemical test. Isn't that right, Dr. Scythe?
Well, bring her into it.
It would be difficult to determine if it was human blood and not the blood of some animal. But yes, to test whether or not it's blood at all is simple enough.
I propose that Madame Tuspels' testimony was correct, and that on the night in question 10 years ago, You were spattered with blood from the gunshot wound. Well, And that furthermore. You really did witness the condemned professor emerging from his tomb, you sucker!